The refineries we had since the civilian regime of Tafawa Balewa or the military regime of Babangida are no longer functioning. What we are all looking forward to in Nigeria today, next year, is Dangote's refinery, which by all standards will meet all the requirements of Nigerian oil and gas. So you can find that the government has been backsliding.
Is that deliberate?
The Constitution allows it. That's what I'm saying. The Constitution has been so created that too much power is vested on the top executives.
But we've witnessed a series of attempts at, rejigging the Constitution, perhaps even giving the nation a brand new one.
You see, the Yorubas have a problem. Odongbodoru. You cannot build, like we lawyers say, you cannot build something on nothing. No matter what you try to amend in the 1999 Constitution, the result will still be a rotten egg. And the people who you are asking now to do that job will not do it at the detriment of their own, interests. You cannot ask the Senate or the House of Reps to create a new constitution that will erase them from the system of governance. They will not agree because they are making so much money in their lifetime. I can swear to God Almighty that most of them here today, after 80 years in governance, the first 35 years or 40 years of their life, they never made such money. How do you want them?
Robert Clark is crazy, and crazy to the extent that people try to fathom a solution. If you have described it as a rotten egg, I think anyone who's ever come across a rotten egg can't even stand the stench. It shows how bad it is. When we got to that era of after the first interregnum of the military rule, after the sack of those who were elected in the 60s, in 1966, and we saw another one that gave way to a democracy in 1979 before the coup that came in 1983. It's very instructive that we should also talk about the coups and the counter coups and the civilian regime so far. Now, today is Democracy Day. Let's start by asking you, so that we can draw back, what does it mean for you when they say June 12th is Nigeria's Democracy Day? Because I asked the question at the start of the show, what then do we call 79 and 60?
I can ascribe 2 days in the history of this country to Democracy Day.
2 days?
2 days. October 1, which was independence and also Democracy Day. Because we got an independence on a constitution that was democratically written by the people and for the people. So democracy came into being the day we became independent in 1960. However, with the incessant, coups, the military coups, we had jettisoned October 1 into history. We now started having the first so-called Democracy Day, October 1, 1979. October 1, 1971 can never and could never have been a Democracy Day. One, it was a creation of the military junta. Obasanjo was then the head of state. He brought in the so-called 50 wise men. Awolowo refused to join for one reason or the other. So there were 49 wise men who deliberated, came out with good and fundamental. The Rotimi Williams group never came out with a presidential system of government. May his good soul rest in peace. He told me that. And many of the actions that brought in are for history to judge. There were manipulations. Okay, we came in with a parliamentary system of governance. Many of the insertions in the 1979 Constitution were forced on us by the military.
Let me get this straight. They sat down and the Constitution they were going to hand us was a a parliamentary system of government.
Yeah.
Not the presidential.
Not the presidential, but you know it had to go to the Supreme Military Council. It was there. The manipulations were all made. And insertions, other insertions, like the land use decree, what has that got to do with the Constitution? They were all brought into the Constitution. So you cannot regard also the 1979 Constitution, even though done by a group of 49 civilians, as that for the people and for the people. Now, the third constitution we had was not a constitution. It was a decree promulgated by the Babangida regime for purposes of turning Nigeria from a military government to a civilian government. And that was where Abiola's election came into being, under that decree. So that was not a democracy. Democracy came, and which I accept, the day the election was held, on a decree that was not for the people, but the representatives of the people were brought forward by the parties. Incidentally, I played a lot of, I took part. I was the sole secretary to NRC for almost 3 years. I was Tommy Kimi's personal legal advisor for it. So I wasn't in the heat of all these things.
So at that point in time, was the two-party system best for Nigeria?
It was. Let me be honest with you. If there were no two parties in that election, 1993.
1993 election.
We will not have this sort of qualities being ascribed to that the election, that it was peaceful. It was peaceful because there were only two parties. The campaigns were, just the two parties, no spending money that we are spending like this. Nominations were not do or die, that if I don't get nomination, I can rush to another party. So Babangida did the country well by saying that a little bit to the left, a little bit to the right. So go and find your brothers and sisters in any of these two parties. And there's no need, if you are rejected in the primary in this party, you are sure you are going to another party, which is what is happening now. So it was a good thing. If Nigeria can go on that pattern, it's good, but it's difficult. Because we Nigerians were the problem of Nigeria, and we create our problems. But it was a good idea. But what I'm saying is that that constitution that brought in the two parties was not made by the people. It was made by the military junta. But the result, that election, which the military junta then even declared that it appeared to be clean, clear, and however, their own agenda came into it. That there were other hidden agendas which are unknown to us. But to us, it was the most peaceful. I accept that, and today I am so happy that what happened that day is now been given credibility.
Well, it's good that we're here on a day like this. So many will say history was made. But again, that wasn't the only election annulled. I recall, 1993, by the way, was the first time. I was the first-time voter in 1993, that election of a two-party system. But before then, I also recall that there was an election that was annulled, the one that had Yaradua as the winner.
Those were primaries within, you see, the football field was being changed. When the two parties were created, there was a limitation ascribed to candidates who cannot contest. Yaradua, those who had held political posts, so each party had a list of candidates who were not allowed by the military to participate. So those are the ones you are talking about. Now, later on, when the first primary was then done, and Shinkafe, NRC, and all these things, the military annulled it. It's not an election. It is the party primaries, creating an avenue for candidates to emerge to contest an election. And then later on, the parties were disbanded. And Tommy Kimi was removed as NRC chairman. Kinjibe was removed as the SDP chairman. And Aneni and Kushamotu were brought in later, And under them, Yar'Adua and others now were allowed. But again, their names were removed. But not the election was annulled. They were not allowed to contest.
Tell us, June 12, for some people, it is fading away, especially in a nation where history, once upon a time, was removed from our educational, syllabus. What truly transpired? Who is the man that today is being ascribed to? Chief M.K. Abiola, was he a true Democrat?
This is a big question you are asking me to answer. When Babangida created the political parties, Abiola stood behind because he had already been, during the Second Republic, the chairman of NPN in Ogun State and a national. But after a year in the 1979 politics, Abiola decided, for one reason or the other, I think he made that statement then that the presidency was not for sale. And he withdrew from politics at that stage. But when Babangida's government came in and created, he abstained from, at first, joining any of the two parties. The NRC were wooing him. And I remembered, I think Okukpe is still alive, myself, Okukpe, were sent, and one third person, one of our gubernatorial, to see him in Ikeja when we heard that he wanted to come back into politics, to woo him to come back to NRC. I was one of those sent. And we told him he should rather be a father figure to a political party rather than participating, but he refused to heed our advice. And when the opportunity shot out that the two candidates of the two parties were declared unfit and a new election had to be done, he was allowed and he joined the SDP then. So that was his foray into politics during that period. Whether that period is enough to now say he's the head or whatever, it's for every individual, because what he had done within that short period is very important to you and I. Not the time he had spent in the politics, but what he did. And I give him kudos for having done what he did.
I'll take a moment. I'm not letting you go yet. When we come back, we'll be looking at the issue that played out in Abuja today with the man, M.K. Abiola, being remembered by President Buhari and a whole lot of others who people have called the true heroes of our democracy. We'll take a moment here and we'll return shortly. Stay with us.